Hi everyone, how are you? Welcome to today's video. So in this video, we are going to show you how you can create a pivot charts wherein these two pivot charts are connected, okay, with one slicer. So you may have seen in one of my videos how you can do this in Excel, but that video utilized one data source. So you must have one table, and that one table should be the source of both charts, and you can easily connect them using the report connections tool. So I will put the link in the comment section or in the description about that video. However, in this video, we are going to show you how you're going to do this if your two pivot charts came from two different worksheets or tables. So I have here one worksheet producing the column chart and another worksheet producing the pie chart. And one thing that you would notice is that the charts or the tables do not have anything in common other than the dates. So the dates will act as the slicer because that's the only common table that we have. And we are going to do this using Power Pivot. Okay. So let's start doing this. So I have here a fresh copy of the file, and this file doesn't have that worksheet yet, wherein we have the two pivot charts. So I only have the first table in another worksheet and another in a different tab. So take note that you can also perform this if your tables are coming from different files. That's actually also okay. But in this video, we're just going to put them in the same file, make it easy to demonstrate. So I'm going to demonstrate real quick how we can create the charts. So the ideal way of doing this is you haven't really started your pivot charts yet or even pivot table. If you already have your pivot chart or pivot table existing, you can fast forward a little bit in the video so that you can find that out. But if you haven't started your pivot charts at all, then I would recommend that before you even start your pivot chart, you would convert that range into a table. So in Excel, this is not really considered yet as a table. This is more of a range of cells. So to convert this range of cells into a table, you have to click Control T in your keyboard. So once you have Control T, you will have this pop up. And honestly, I'm not sure if the recording will capture this, but in this pop up, you're just going to click OK. You're usually okay with just that, and you will see that the range of cells have been converted into a table. So usually tables by default will have parallel colors, and this is something that would be easy to convert into a pivot table later on. This is not a required procedure, but best so that it's going to be seamless when we create the dashboard later. Then I'm also going to do that for the other table. So I just have to click Control T, and in the pop-up, click OK. And just a reminder, by the way, before you even click Control T, you have to make sure that your cursor is somewhere inside within the range of cells, not like outside over here, because you want your Control T to detect which range of cells you are converting into a table. And if it's outside the range of cells, then it doesn't know which data you're trying to convert to a table. So I will click any cell within the table or range of cells and control and click Control T. So we have our Control T here, and this is the pop-up. So if you notice, I sort of like changed the way I'm recording this. So I have here a Control T pop-up create table wherein you will see the range of cells being detected. And there's a checkbox here that says my table has header. So this is actually the most important checkbox that you need for this one. That's the only one though. Then click OK. And now you should have both our pivot charts, our tables, okay, converted, okay, into what Excel really understands as a table. So the next thing that we have to do then is we're going to create the pivot charts. So we start with the first table and go to insert, and then under insert we should see there pivot chart. Okay, and then we click that, And you should have here that the table is being detected by Excel. And then we're going to start a new worksheet for this scenario. So I'm going to click OK now. And now we have our new worksheet with a blank pivot table. So we're going to create our first pivot chart. We're going to drag the branch and drag it here, the axis area of the pivot table. And then, of course, we need to put in the sales as well. So sales is the column of numbers. So I'm going to put that under values. So we now have our first pivot. Okay. And from here, you could create the slicer, or you can also do that later. But for now, I'm going to create the second uh, pivot chart. So now I'm going to the second table. And from there, I'm going to click one cell. And then once I click on one cell, I'm going to again go to insert and then choose pivot chart. And I have here again the create pivot chart dialog box. But for this scenario, we're going to not create a new worksheet. We're going to put them together in the same worksheet. So I'm going to select existing worksheet here in my create pivot chart pop-up. And then for the location, you have to click here on this arrow up button, and then I will navigate towards the sheet that was created by the first pivot table, and I'm going to point here. So somewhere clear, okay, wherein there's no data yet or chart, I will select that so that that is where the second pivot table will show up. So from there, I can click OK. So now I have my second pivot table ready. And for this one, let's say that I am going to bring in the salesperson. You could, of course, create your own fields here, but I have the salesperson, and then I'm also going to bring in the amount, which is the values, okay, of this report. And for a different chart, let's say, of course, sometimes having the same charts can be boring. So you can right click on the second chart or the other chart and then choose change chart type so that you can choose whichever type of chart you prefer for this second chart. So I'm going to choose a pie chart for this one, and then I'm going to click OK. So now I have my second pivot chart. So now we're going to bring in a slicer. So I'm going to click the first one and then the first chart, and then I'm going to go to analyze, okay, in the tab, and then you have to go to insert slicer. So under insert slicer, you will be able to see another pop-up, and in this pop-up you're going to select which slicer you're going to do. So let's say that I'm going to select the sale date, okay, and then click OK. So I now have here, just to show you, okay, that it's not actually going to work if we're going to connect to the pie chart here. So I have here another one date, and you should see that the pie chart is not moving. That is not a surprise really, because this slicer will not connect yet to the pie chart. So traditionally, what we could do is we simply have to right click on the slicer and click report connections. So this should be able to connect the pivot table, the second one, to the first pivot table. But as you could see, when I do that, the second pivot table is not being detected by my report connections tool. And the reason is like what I mentioned earlier in this video, and that is because the pie chart was created using another table, and that's not how report connections work. Report connections require that they come from the same data source for this to work. So, how are we going to solve this scenario? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to first delete this. That's not actually going to help us anymore. So, what we're going to do is we're going to upload the data first in Power Pivot. Okay, so what we should have done is not like that. Okay, so I'll delete this. That's wrong, entirely wrong. So I'm going to first click here, and then I'm going to go to my Power Pivot tab. Okay. If you do not have the Power Pivot tab, then you simply have to go to File and you have to go to Options. And then under File Options, you have to go to Add-ins. And under Add-ins, all the way down, you should see there Manage, and there's this drop-down field over here. You have to select Com Add-ins and then click Go. You should see that you have all the add-ins available for you in Excel, and whether they are activated or not. So you should have Power Pivot here, and kindly check that one. So if you do not have this, it means that your Excel doesn't support Power Pivot. So either you download Power Pivot from the Microsoft website or upgrade to the latest versions of Power Pivot or Excel, I mean, because Power Pivot is there by default. So I'm going to check this, click OK. Okay, in my case, I already have that. So now I'm going to create my Power Pivot first before I even do those charts. So first I have to click the first table, and under Power Pivot, you should see that there's a button there that says Add to Data Model. So this button will sort of like upload this table in the Power Pivot. Later you will see that if you haven't seen it yet. So add this table to the data model, and you will notice that your Excel will start loading the Power Pivot screen. So this is Power Pivot. I already have a video about what Power Pivot exactly does and how do you use it. Okay. I will put that link as well in the description of this video. Now, you should see that this Power Pivot is a separate tool or program within Excel. And I already managed to see the first table, okay, as you could see here at the lower part, table 1. Now, I'm also going to do that to P2 or the second table. So I'm going to click any cell within the table and then go to Power Pivot and also do a add to data model, okay, to that second table. And you will see that the Power Pivot screen is again updating. And now, if you notice at the lower part of Power Pivot, you will see that I have the two tables connected or loaded into Power Pivot. Now, in Power Pivot, you have to connect these two tables because technically they're just loaded. They're not yet connected to each other. So to connect, you have to go to Diagram View. So if you go to Diagram View under Home of Power Pivot and then all the way to the right, Diagram View, your Power Pivot will switch to this kind of view wherein you have the tables and only the columns are visible. And from here, you're supposed to connect, okay, fields or columns that are the same so that Power Pivot sort of like connects them. So I'm going to drag sale date because that is the field that also can be found in table 2, which in this case is date book. So these two fields are the same. They're both dates. They are the only fields that are similar between the two tables. So I'm going to connect them. Unfortunately, you will get a message that says the relationship cannot be created because each column contains duplicate values. So one requirement of Power Pivot is that one table among the two should have unique values. It's like VLOOKUP. You cannot VLOOKUP to a table wherein the other table that you are looking up into has duplicates, or else VLOOKUP will sort of like get confused and will only give you the first result. So the similar thing is happening here. Since there are duplicates on both sides of my table, I cannot connect the two. And unfortunately, that's not something I can really solve by removing the duplicates because these are dates. So I have transactions that are maybe uh, in a day I have two transactions, so I cannot really sort of like make the column of the dates unique. Similar with the other table, these are also sales, so I really cannot change the dates or remove the dates just so they will be unique. It's very possible that in one day you have more than one purchase, you have more than one sale, and your table should be able to retain that information. So here is Okay, here's what you're going to do if you want to solve this problem in Power Pivot. So we're going to create a new worksheet. And in this new worksheet, we're going to put in the date column. And we're going to identify what is the earliest date, okay, in my table. So I have here August 28th until October 17th. So the other table, though, the earliest date is also August 28th, but the last day is, let's say, November 23rd. So August 28th and November 23rd. So that's going to be what I'm going to put here, October 28th. You can put something earlier, like October 20, no worries, that will work. So August 20, 2016. And then to drag it, you just have to click on the fill handle and drag until you have all the dates possible in your report. So I know it only ended somewhere in November, but I'm just going to make sure and end my table until November 30th. So now I have a table here that contains unique dates. Now, the next field that I want is going to be the month, because this is, as you can remember in the file that I showed you earlier, the month is acting as the slicer. So I am going to create that column here, and I'm going to extract the month of this cell on the left by using the function text. So text of A2 and then comma. I'm going to format it as month. So I'm going to type in this format code, this syntax, which is 4 letter M's, and this will give me the month of that cell on the left side. I will then double click, okay, so that it cascades to all of the data that I have. And now I have my table ready. So we call this bridge table because it will act as a bridge between the two files that we have. So now I will also convert this into a table. So Control T. And in the pop-up, you just have to make sure that my table has headers is checked and then click OK. So now I will do the same and also load this in my Power Pivot. So I will go to Power Pivot tab and click Add to Data Model. So that will reload the Power Pivot in Excel. And now you should see that we have the third table adding up, okay, in my diagram view. So I will then drag, okay, them around so that it's easier to see. We're in the bridge table is somewhere in the middle. Okay, this is not required to like lay out them, but it's easier so that you know which table is acting as the bridge. Now from the bridge table, I'm going to drag date and drag it or connect it to the date of my first table. It's important the direction, okay, should come from the bridge and going to the constituent table. So now you let Power Pivot load it, and I'm getting an error here wherein the operation cannot be performed because another operation in progress. Okay, fine. So right now it's sort of like still loading. So let me just refresh this. I'm going to go back to data view first, and then I'm going to go to diagram view. And now I'm going to try it again. Hopefully it's done doing whatever it's trying to do. Yes, it is. So now I managed to connect my bridge table to the constituent table. And take note that there's the number one showing up from the bridge table because remember, the bridge table contains unique dates. That is why you're seeing the number one on that side. And on the side of the child table, the first table, you're seeing the asterisk. This is the symbol for many. Okay, and that means that that table contains duplicate dates. And this is our desired relationship or cardinality of the tables. One should come from the bridge, and then many should come from the child. Or and then the direction should be from the parent, from the bridge, going to the child. You should see that there's an arrow in the relationship line, okay, showing which is acting as the parent and which is the child. So next is I'm going to do that, okay, to the other table as well. So from the date of the bridge table, I'm going to drag and connect to the date book of the second table. So my power pivot is again loading. So now I have here one from the bridge table and many on the other table. So this is our again correct format, okay, of the table. So it can happen, by the way, that the number one is going to come from the constituent table and then many sign is coming from table three. So double check. Okay. Remember, the goal is one from the parent table or the bridge table. If that happens to you, what you can do is double click the relationship line and sort of like examine, okay, the problem. So the one on top, okay, is the constituent table and the parent table is the one below. So you sort of like make sure that you're selecting the right tables, okay, whichever should go at the first. So the one on the lower part should be the bridge, the one above should be the constituent. So you just have to sort of change the selections here and make sure that the dates are selected, highlighted for each of the tables. Okay. Anyway, if ever you're matching in not columns that are incorrect, you will see that the Power Pivot Edit Relationship tool will show you a warning, and it's currently not supported. So you have to make sure that that warning doesn't show up. So click OK. And now we have our diagram view selected or created. So I'm now going to save it. Take note that when you save in Power Pivot, it also saves your Excel file. Next, I'm going to now create my first pivot table from here. So under home of my Power Pivot, you should see there we have a pivot table button. So I'm going to create a pivot table first, and Excel will then load and ask you whether you like a new or existing worksheet. So just like your regular pivot table. So I will go to new worksheet and then click OK. So now I have our first pivot table, but you will notice that in this Power Pivot, you will notice that we have three tables now in my pivot table on the right side pane. And from here, I could start creating my first pivot table. So if you remember, I drag branch and then I drag sales. Okay. So now I created my first pivot table from the first table. Now I'm going to also bring in my pivot chart. So I'm going to go to analyze and then pivot chart and choose pie chart or column chart for this. Next is I'm going to create the second pivot. So I'm going to go back to my Power Pivot window. And just in case you already closed this accidentally, you can always go back to that by going to Power Pivot and clicking Manage. This will send you back to Power Pivot in case you closed it. So I'm going to create the second pivot table. So I'm going to click Home. And then under Home, I'm going to select Pivot Table again. So from here, this time, I'm going to select Existing Worksheet. And I'm going to point my Excel low over here. So let me select this one and then click OK. So, okay, again. So now my second pivot table is loading. So I'm going to create another pivot chart for that one. So if I remember it right, those were the salesperson. And I'm going to bring in the amount. Okay. So I'm also going to add the chart for this. So analyze and then pivot chart. And then I'm going to choose pie and then click OK. So I now have my two charts again, but take note that this time it was created with the help of Power Pivot. Power Pivot is the one that sort of like connected my two tables and used a bridge chart because my two tables doesn't have anything in common exactly. So now the next thing is I'm going to bring in the slicer. So I'm going to click on any one of these charts and then go to analyze. Once you are in analyze, you can then click insert slicer. So once you have the insert slicer, you will notice that you will only have one table in the insert slicers pop up. But you should notice that there's this tab, all, that shows you all the tables as well in the slicer. So as you could see, this is brought to us by the power pivot. If you have a regular pivot table, then you should not have the all button, all tab, and you should only have the columns applicable for that one table. But since we're using a power pivot data model, you should see the all tab. And from here, I'm going to select month coming from the third table, the bridge table that we have, and then click OK. So we now have the slicer, and let's see if this slicer will control both. Okay. So I'm going to click October, and you should see that it's only connected to the first one because just like what I showed you earlier, you still have to connect this slicer to the second pivot chart. This slicer was only created for the first one. So to connect, we have to right click on the slicer and then report connections. And then under report connections, unlike a while ago wherein we don't have another option, this time, since we have the two pivot tables using the data model, you should see that I have two pivot tables here. Obviously, what we have to do is check the second one, which means that this slicer can also now control the second pivot table that we have. So from here, we're going to click OK. And we now have connected the pie chart, okay, to the slicer. And let's see if that will solve our issue. Okay, and there you go. Both my charts are now connected, okay, in my report, in my slicer. So you can do many charts, okay, or even connect three tables if you want. You simply have to do the procedure of controlling and converting it to a table first, and then add it to the data model, and then once you are in Power Pivot, you have to connect, okay, the table in some way to each other. So I have a separate video for an introduction to Power Pivot. You can watch that. I'll put the link in the chat box or in the comment section, I mean. So for now, I hope this helped you if this is the problem that you're trying to solve in Excel. And if ever this helped you, I hope you like and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, feel free to use the comment section and I'll do my best to answer you as soon as I can. But for now, this is it. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.